Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Kira. I'm on the adult programming team here at the Framingham Public Library. And tonight you are here for the sustainability series, Get Comfy with Heat Pumps. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. If you have a cell phone, please silence it now. There'll be a time for questions at the end of the program. And there are evaluation forms in the back, if you would fill those out at the end of the program. We love your feedback. We read everything. And also, if you would share ideas for any future programs that you would like to see, whether they're related to this or any other topic. So again, tonight's program, Get Comfy with Heat Pumps. It's our final presentation in a 4-part series that we've brought to you with the help of the Framingham Sustainability Committee. And tonight's speaker is Steve Bright. So I'm going to introduce, is it Vice Chair?
Yeah.
Vice Chairperson of the Framingham Sustainability Committee, Amy Polacca, and she will introduce the speaker.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Welcome tonight. Just as Kira was saying, this series is a partnership between the Public Library, so many thanks to the library, and the Framingham Sustainability Committee. We have a series of 4. We're looking at doing the next series. If folks have ideas, come up to me afterwards and let me know. specifically on sustainability issues. So who is the Sustainability Committee? We are a citizen committee appointed by the mayor and established in a Framingham ordinance. We have 8 members shown here, and we have 1 vacancy at the moment. You can see a couple of my colleagues here in the audience. We represent a range of expertise, everything from strategic planning, architecture, sustainable enterprise management, et cetera. Also, shout out to Framingham City Sustainability Coordinator, Sean Les, here in the audience. He does a lot of the great work the city works on. The Sustainability Committee, as I said, was established in 2020. We started meeting in 2021. And there's some of our duties. And we do a lot of work with Sean in advising different city departments. And so you can visit the sustainability page for the City of Framingham on this webpage. You can learn a lot more information. And I have a couple of upcoming programs just to quickly plug. The city is working on what's called a community electricity to contract to purchase electricity in bulk on behalf of residents and businesses. Just to plant your idea that that's coming, no more to say about that, but if you hear something, you know to go to the sustainability page. And this is the current program, which is called the Framingham Community First Partnership. It's a partnership with Eversource, who is our partner in the Mass Save, our provider in the Mass Save program. And both Framingham and Natick qualified to be partners to promote Mass Save here in Framingham. You can see on the bottom, we have a couple of goals. 3 goals there. And the middle one is actually about high efficiency heating or cooling upgrades, which is what heat pumps fall under. And there are services provided in all 3 languages. So this will help you through your Mass Save efficiency program, and a great place to get started if you're looking at heat pumps. And finally, we are working on creating a climate action plan. Again, stay tuned for more information, but that'll be a citywide climate planning process. And with that, I would like to introduce Steve Bright of the Heat Smart Alliance, and a wonderful colleague of mine over at another nonprofit called Mass Energize. And so with that, Steve has been an amazing resource and coach in general to the entire state in terms of developing coaching programs for heat pumps, because as you'll hear, they might be a little tricky, depending, but Steve will let us know. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see everybody out in person again after a few years of doing everything virtually. This is only my second live presentation in the last 3 years. All right, so clean heating, getting comfy with heat pumps, clean heating and cooling for your home. Those are the topics. And so I'm with the Heat Smart Alliance. Our mission is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by accelerating adoption of energy efficient heat pumps in Massachusetts homes and buildings. The applications we focus on are home heating and cooling and water heating. We're an all-volunteer organization. Currently, we have over 80, this slide was made in January before the snow day. We have over 80 participants in 32 Massachusetts communities, all volunteers, and growing. And as Amy said, we have members who do coaching within their communities, but we're also affiliated with local coaching initiatives for heat pumps in up to 14 other communities now. Our approach is to educate. That's what I'm doing tonight, to inform you about heat pumps, coaching, and collaborating with other organizations with similar goals and interests. We don't accept donations or referral fees from installers, heat pump installers, or equipment manufacturers, so that we can, be as objective as possible about the options that are available to homeowners. So why heat pumps? You've heard that heat pumps are just a technology. I opened up with the title of clean heating. The the reason we're interested in heat pumps is because, as we all know, we're facing a climate emergency. And if you look at where energy is used in New England, about 30% of the energy in New England is used in homes. So this is an important pathway, as it's called, to reducing our overall greenhouse gas emissions. And when it comes to home heating and cooling, about 80% is due to the cooling and heating of your home. In fact, it's actually mostly the heating in this climate. So if you're looking for a way to reduce your home or your household's greenhouse gas emissions, this is one of the most important and impactful things you can do. The hot water accounts for another as much as 17% in typical homes. And then there are a few other applications like clothes drying that are all amenable to about 80% of overall uses can be handled by heat pumps. So what's the path to decarbonizing your home? The first thing is to weatherize the home. Mass Save has wonderful benefits that are available to everyone in Framingham. They're almost free in most cases, or heavily subsidized for everyone. It depends on your income level and what they're doing, but the least level of subsidy is about 75%. So getting a free home energy audit, even if you had one a few years ago, you're eligible to do another one every 2 years. And Mass Save has changed its focus over the last 2 years from putting in LED light bulbs to improving the insulation in homes and the air sealing. And those are very important for reducing the amount of heat that has to go into the home. The second step is to electrify everything in the home, but that means especially electrifying the heating. And then to shift to renewable energy. The energy you get from Eversource is gradually becoming more renewable, but you can also do things like rooftop solar, participating in the upcoming aggregation program. There are a number of ways you can make sure that you're getting renewable electricity. So what's a heat pump? It's just a device that moves heat from a cold place or a cooler place to a warmer place. It's a mechanical device. In fact, you already have heat pumps in your home. You don't call them that. A refrigerator is a heat pump. A dehumidifier or an air conditioner are heat pumps. They fit that definition in the first line. So heat pumps are available now for home heating and cooling, for water heating, for clothes drying, and even for pool heating. But the top use would be the heating of the home. And essentially the way they, very simplified view of how they work, if you put in 1 unit of electricity, the heat pump takes additional energy, thermal energy, from the outdoor air. Yes, even when it's -5 degrees out, a heat pump can do that. There are also other types of heat pumps that take heat from the ground, but either way, the heat pumps using the electricity to capture heat that's already available in the environment and pumping that into the home. So for typical air source heat pumps, if you put in 1 unit of electricity, you get 3 units of heat into the home. This is far more efficient than electric baseboard heating, which is just 1-to-1. You put in 1 unit into an electric baseboard, you get 1 unit of heat in the home. This is 3 times more efficient than that. So the key message here, because every time I do this presentation, by the end of it, somebody says, what about air conditioning? Do they do cooling? Yes, heat pumps do heating and cooling. If you put one of these in, it's going to be your air conditioner, and it's going to provide heating. What are the benefits for Massachusetts homes? You get a substantial reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Energy cost savings, if you're heating now with fuel oil or propane, you'll have modest savings. I'll quantify these in a few slides. significant savings versus electric baseboards. There are a few homes still doing electric baseboards. It's safer. You don't have any risk of carbon monoxide or explosion from gas in the home if you remove the gas. And it can be more comfortable because the heat pump can modulate the temperature very closely to your thermostat setting instead of going on and off like your furnace or boiler does. So how much emissions reduction? This chart looks at a typical 2,000 square foot home, and the units on the bottom here are tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And the case for ground source or air source heat pumps, roughly around 1 ton, give or take, if you're using current electricity from Eversource, versus as much as 3 to 4 times as more emissions from natural gas, electric baseboards, propane, or fuel oil being the highest emissions. Now, if you convert to 100% renewable electricity, your greenhouse gas emissions from heating go to 0. So this is a really big win. Now, there are various types of heat pumps, and I've learned we could be spending hours with me explaining the technical ins and outs of these different heat pumps, but we're going to keep it pretty simple, and then I'm going to try to allow plenty of time for questions so that you can ask about what might be appropriate for your home. So the first thing is it depends what type of heating system you have now. Let's say your home has what's called a hydronic heating system. You have baseboards with hot water flowing through them, or radiators with hot water or steam flowing. That's called a hydronic heating system. That means you have a boiler somewhere in the house, probably in the basement. The other common type is forced air distribution. In that case, you have vents on the walls or in the floor, maybe sometimes in the ceiling, and you have a furnace in the basement that's fueled by natural gas or oil or propane. So those are the main 2 types. There are a lot of houses in this area have had renovations, so it's not unusual to find multiple kinds of heating and cooling systems in houses. So if you have hydronic distribution, the most common solution with a heat pump is called a ductless mini-split system. These are fall into the category of air source heat pumps. And originally, if you go back 15 years or so ago, they were all single zone systems. You had a single outdoor unit, or sometimes called a condenser, outside that looked kind of like the image here, and a unit on the wall. And if you've gone around to other people's homes, you've probably seen these ductless systems. Another common type that came in about 5 to 8 years ago are multi-zone systems. In that case, you might have a single outdoor unit connected to multiple indoor units. In fact, they can go around. One of these outdoor units can serve half the home or sometimes a whole home, depending on the size of the home. And you have a lot more options now for what the indoors units look like. If you don't have wall space for a wall unit, there are ceiling cassettes, there are floor units, and to make it even more complicated, there are what are called compact ducted units that can serve several rooms at once with very short ducting. And when you put in any kind of heat pump, particularly these air source heat pumps, you can keep your existing oil or gas system just for backup. You don't need to use it. In fact, as I'll talk later, for the highest mass save rebates, you have to commit to not using it except in an emergency. So that one day we had this winter where it went down below -10 degrees, that would have qualified as an emergency, and you might have needed your old oil system to back up the heat pump on that day. All right, so heat pump options for forced air. If you have a forced air system that is with a furnace and ducting in the home, then usually the most economical way to add a heat pump, or and previously, if you already have central air conditioning, chances are that it's working in combination with your furnace. Above the furnace, there's something called a coil, and that coil transfers cooling or heating from the outdoor unit to the air that the blower in the furnace is pushing through the home. There's also a possibility of complete electrification where you replace the furnace with something called an air handler, and in that case, all of your heat is going to come from the heat pump. One other category that is ground source heat pumps. These are actually more efficient than air source heat pumps. This would also be a form of complete electrification of your heating, and it's taking, in this case, they have to drill wells, quite deep wells somewhere on your property. They're connected to the indoor unit, which would be in the place of wherever your furnace is currently. And these are the most efficient types of heat pumps, but as I'll explain, they can be a bit more complicated to install. Again, with any of these options, it's an option if the existing ducting is suitable, which means it should be insulated, sealed, and properly sized for using a heat pump. So ground source versus air source heat pumps. With ground source heat pumps, they are more costly, but there are larger incentives that offset most of that additional cost. They have a 50 to 70% higher efficiency, so lower energy costs to operate them and lower emissions. There's nothing outdoors that, once it's installed, there's nothing to see outdoors, so it's somewhat better aesthetics. And it's packaged in the factory. The refrigerant that's in the system is packaged in the factory. There's absolutely no chance of that, or very, very minimal chance of that refrigerant leaking. And refrigerant itself is a very powerful greenhouse gas, so we don't want that to escape into the atmosphere. Air source heat pumps tend to be lower cost to install. There's usually less, just because of that well drilling in the property that I mentioned. There's no disturbance or less disturbance of the landscaping. Just needs a little bit of space outdoors for that outdoor unit. And these ductless options, if you don't have ducting, then air source heat pumps are pretty much the main option at this point. I would be remiss in not mentioning water heating. So that's, again, as I said at the beginning, a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions from your home, probably 10 to 15% for many homes. And there are now heat pump water heaters that they're a little larger than a conventional water heater. They can be installed by plumbers as well as HVAC installers. There are behind-the-scenes incentives, and now I'll talk about, there's some federal incentives for heat pump water heaters. So if you have an open basement and your water heater is nearing its end of life, which means 7 to 10 years for electric water heaters, you should really be thinking about a heat pump water heater. All right, so the question on everybody's minds is how much will it cost? And of course, the answer is it depends. But I'll try to first look at the operating costs. So that these are a comparison for the 2022-23 heating season. None of us can predict where energy prices are going. It looks like many people are aware that there was a big bump in the Eversource electric rates currently. However, National Grid has now filed for a considerable reduction in the rates starting in their next 6-month period, and it wouldn't surprise me if Eversource rates also come down. In any case, this is a comparison of heating costs. You can see that compared to propane or oil, there's a modest savings for an air source heat pump. A ground source heat pump might reduce by 30 to 40%. Further, natural gas is still quite inexpensive, and so heating the whole heating season with an air source heat pump will cost a little bit more money, but there are ways to avoid all of that extra cost. So And it really is going to vary over the life of the heating system. What are the financial incentives? I've mentioned already the Mass Save program. If you electrify your homes with a heat pump such that the heat pump is providing most of the heat, that is, except in emergency situations, for ground source heat pumps, there's an initial, toward the initial cost of $15,000 a rebate. Toward air source heat pumps, a $10,000 toward the initial cost. And then if the air source heat pump is not capable of supplying all the heat to the home, there are still incentives at $12.50 per ton of heating capacity. So to give you some idea, a typical home will take 3 to 5 tons of capacity. So you're looking at an incentive of somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 for partial home conversions. There's also, and actually this is out of date now, up to $50,000 of 0% loan for 7 years, and with inflation being what it is right now, that's a pretty good deal. And there are additional benefits for income eligible folks, and there's a lot of detail and qualifying for those, but there's some generous benefits there. The Inflation Reduction Act that was passed actually it was passed last summer, also has some new tax credits. For ground source heat pumps, there's a 30% credit against the total cost, and I believe that's before applied, that 30% is applied before the Mass Save rebates. So, and then there's also for air source heat pumps a $2,000 tax credit. So between this $10,000 and the $2,000 from the federal tax credit, you might be looking at $12,000 for a whole home heat pump conversion. And even for a partial home, it's pretty easy to qualify for that $2,000 credit. There's also up to a $2,000 credit for heat pump water heaters. There are further income-based rebates that are preliminary at this point. They haven't, they're still working out the details. But for if you're income eligible as determined by the Mass Save program, then there could be additional rebates available. So when you're looking at converting to a heat pump, you really have to look at the first cost difference, a heat pump versus conventional equipment. So let's say your furnace or boiler needs to be replaced. You need heating. There's not an option that you can live in this climate, at least comfortably, without a heating system. So you're going to be spending something on a new heating system. So when you're looking at the cost of a heat pump versus just keeping whatever system you have or replacing whatever system you have, it's the difference between those two, the marginal cost. If you don't have air conditioning yet, and you want to add central air, which is more and more becoming a necessity in this climate, you have to put some value on the fact that you're going to get air conditioning when you put in the heat pump. Take a look at the costs that you get, the cost estimates you get from installers, and apply those incentives, the Mass Save incentives, the loans, and the tax credits when you're considering the cost. And you may consider assigning a cost to the carbon emissions that you're saving. Unfortunately, we don't actually reward you yet for that, but there's a possibility that that will be rewarded in the next, in the not too distant future. And it should also, putting in a heat pump should also increase the home resale value. We've had a realtor speak to the somebody who looked at this speak to the Heat Smart Alliance, who said there's evidence that this will improve the home's resale value. So all of that said, it's very difficult to get precise dollar estimates for the operating the energy costs because of the uncertainties about future energy costs. So your action plan: you want to convert to a heat pump if your existing system is aging. If the heating or cooling system in your home is 15 years or older, you might be starting to think about replacing it. If the water heater is 7 to 10 years old, you may want to start thinking about replacing it. This is not something that you want to do in an emergency basis. Don't wait till it's a 20-degree February day and your heating system has failed, because at that point you're just going to have to do it quickly, and it's hard to get to do a considered choice at that point. I'll have questions for you in a moment. If you're adding air conditioning to your home, putting in a heat pump is the best way to do it now. And if you're planning an addition or a renovation or a new home, you certainly want to plan it for, and the additional space should be heated and cooled 100% with heat pumps. And there are programs with Mass Save to help you do that. So how do you get informed? We have a page on our site that's sort of a clearinghouse. We link to information on a lot of other sites that we consider trustworthy. That's heatsmartalliance.org/resources. Get a free Mass Save home energy assessment if you haven't done so already, and follow through on the recommendations from the assessment. And finally, there are, in some communities, Framingham not yet, but seek help from your friends and neighbors, and through the Framingham Sustainability Committee, there'll be people who can give you helpful advice. So with that, I'm going to, one more thing is, it's really good to, if you're looking into this, we always advise getting quotes from multiple heating, cooling installers. I would say get at least 3 quotes. Every home is unique. The installers will have a different take depending on, so you'll learn from each installer, and you'll get a range of prices and a range of equipment. And there is a service available to help you evaluate the quotes. The service is from Abode Energy, and it costs about $150, but considering what the overall cost of the heating system would be, that might be money well spent. So I'm going to, before we have 2 people here, Larry Stote and Don Groves, who are Framingham residents and active on the members of the Sustainability Committee. And before I call on them, I want to take a couple questions, and then we'll have Don and Larry come up and talk about the heat pumps in their homes. So 1 or 2 questions, and okay, go ahead.
So, what temperature outside would you recommend? We have gas and putting in heat pumps. What temperature would you recommend changing back to the gas for economic reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Running gas is a lot cheaper than
Right,
electricity.
right. Okay, so I'm going to repeat your question for the online viewers. So the question is, the question resident has gas in their home, and as I showed you, heating with gas can be cheaper than heating with a air source heat pump. However, the heat pumps are actually most efficient when it's warmer outside, so and a bit less efficient at colder temperatures. So there's actually a crossover where heating with the heat pump is actually less costly than gas, and then at lower temperatures it can be more costly. So if you cross over around freezing, around 30 degrees, and that's actually Mass Save requires that your installer set up the system that way to qualify for the partial home rebate. So if you cross over around 30 degrees, the cost will be about the same for heating with gas and heating with electricity. As you reduce the crossover point, and those are something that's settable in the thermostats usually, as you reduce that crossover point, you'll end up paying a little more for electricity and more, the extra costs. So right now it's somewhere around 30 degrees where it won't be painful. It might be $100 or $200 difference a heating season out of a $2,000 bill. So another question. Go ahead.
We've had 3 vendors in so far getting quotes.
Yes.
Nobody's mentioned the hot water heat pump.
Yeah, so the question is, this resident has had 3 installers come and provide quotes for heat pumps. Are they, okay, but nobody's mentioned a heat pump water heater. And so you can, it depends on how your water is heated currently, so I don't want to go into the details of your home yet. But if the water heating is separate, then you can keep using that water heater, and you don't need to tie those two together. And yeah, I think to some extent the installers don't want to, it's already complicated enough looking at the heating system. They may not want to complicate the sale further by mentioning the heat pump water heater. But it would be great if, we want people to know when you're changing the water heater, that's the option you should be looking at. All right, so I'm going to ask Larry to come up first and talk about your system. And
thank you, Steve. Hi, my name's Larry Stote. I live in Belknap Road. I have a cape that was built back in the 1970s, and it had baseboard heating, electric baseboard heating. So since you'll see my name on the Sustainability Committee and I'm in 350, you might figure out the next question that says, what made you install heat pumps? And that's a question of sustainability for myself and for you folks in the future. We had a Mitsubishi system installed, and we do not have any other form of heating in the house, except we do have a fireplace insert, which we do occasionally use. And when the temperatures fell through the floor, we kept our house at well, you might ask my wife if it was comfortable or not, because I think we have different thermostats. But we kept the house comfortable even during that period. So, and in the summer, we keep the house, we never had air conditioning in the house before. Once we put the heat pump in, we have air conditioning. And to supplement that, we had the house through Mass Save. By the way, do call Mass Save and get an audit. They can save you a lot of money, and they can save the environment a lot of greenhouse gases. We got insulation, and we finally this year changed our windows to heat. So, am I satisfied with the heat pumps? The answer is yes, but I will tell you our house is not designed well for dealing with them because it's broken up, so the airflow doesn't flow through the whole house as well as it could. We have two units, one upstairs, one downstairs, but they keep the house comfortable both winter and summer. And I'd say our electricity costs have gone down, but it's hard to tell with Eversource jacking the prices up whenever they feel like it on a 6-month basis, of course. But the biggest, we had 3 different installers come in, and they gave us 3 different solutions. So we had to do some research to figure out which one of them actually fit us best, and we thought it would actually work best for our family. And that's what all I have to say. I'm a huge enthusiastic supporter of switching to electrification and heat pumps. Thank you very much. Mr. Donald?
I'm Donald Gross. I'm a member of the Framingham Sustainability Committee, and I also am a lead certified designer, and I design high-performance homes. I did a passive certified house in Wayland that was 4,500 square feet, and the entire house is heated by heat pumps. We wanted to, I have a house over in Singletary Lane that's maybe 2,400 square feet. We wanted to put central air in, so we used a conventional air handler and compressor for the second floor, and we put a heat pump in to cool the first floor. The obvious advantage is it also heats. So it's a Fujitsu system, and it's a wall-mounted system near the floor, maybe 20 inches, 24 inches wide by 10 inches deep, and is absolutely silent. And I use it all year round, and it produces heat at any temperature. So you have to remember that there's energy in the air down to absolute zero, which is 460 degrees below zero. So heat pumps have become very, very efficient to extract energy from air at any temperature. And the Japanese technology is really spectacular, and these new heat pumps are efficient down to 10 below zero and even lower. The elegant thing about a heat pump is if we want to live off of current solar income, if you combine a heat pump system with photovoltaics, now your house is heated by the sun through the the PV system, which then drives and powers your heat pump system. So I'm a big enthusiastic person about heat pumps, and any new home that we're designing now, or I'm working on additions, we use mini splits and whole house systems. And if you're thinking about changing your heating system out, heat pumps are absolutely the way to go. And if you can couple that with a PV system on your house or a ground mount system, it's really a very efficient system to reduce greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Don and Larry. It's great to have such enthusiasm. So let's continue with the questions from folks, okay? I'll take this.
Is there any maintenance? Do you have the filter to put in on these heat pumps?
So on the, there are filters for the air. On the mini split systems, they have a built-in filter, and one thing that's important with any of these systems is to have either replace or clean the filter. In the mini split systems, the filters are cleanable. It's a sort of a plastic mesh that it's easy to take it out, and usually I just take an old paintbrush and take it outdoors and brush the dust off it. But you should have, if you're running the mini split all year long, you should probably have a professional come in and clean it at least, I would say at least every 2 years, to clean it, prevent mold from forming inside it during the air conditioning season, clean it out. With central air source heat pumps, there are all sorts of options for filtering from different levels of filters. If you have an old furnace, you probably have these old 1-inch thick filters they do something, but they're not great. There are now much better filters available, and the installers should be talking about those with you when they give you a quote. And it could range from a simple filter to an air purifier, depending on your needs with the central systems. This gentleman.
Is there differences in efficiency between the heat pumps themselves?
So the question is, are there differences in efficiency? Yes. So when installers are quoting them, there's sort of a good, better, and best. So they're usually, you really have to look at the specifications for what they're quoting, particularly for the central air source systems. You want it to be, there's a organization called the New England Energy Partnership that maintains a database of what they called cold climate air source heat pumps. So you want to go look up the system, make sure it's in the database. That's a good sign that it's appropriate for our climate. I occasionally still see installers quoting heat pumps that really aren't suited for this climate. There was, if you go back 15 years or more, there were some homes in this area that were built with heat pumps, but they also had electric resistance backup, and the heat pumps weren't really capable of, they were sort of low efficiency heat pumps at that point, and so people ended up with pretty high electric bills. And it's still the case that if the heat pump might have good specs, but if it's not appropriately sized for the home and it has these electric resistance heaters, watch out you have a few cold days. And
What was the resource you could use?
it's neep.org. You'll have to, unfortunately, it's not front and center on their website to find this CC, it's called the CCAS HP, the cold climate air source heat pump. Yes.
In terms of the hot water heater,
Mhm.
having either one of the
Mhm.
Is it a separate system that taps into that, or the piping goes to the furnace, does it also go to the hot water heater, or?
So, so the question is about how the hot water heaters work. Usually with ground source heat pumps, there is a way to use the ground source heat pump to preheat the hot water. You're still, most knowledgeable ground source heat pump installers will recommend having 2 water tanks. One that's heated, so it's 2 stages. One is heated by the ground source heat pump, and then the second one might be an electric resistance water heater that boosts the temperature another 15, 20 degrees to make it, at the level you need for hot water. And that'll save energy, but it's also more costly to put in 2 tanks. So our thinking at this point is, even if with a ground source heat pump, you're better off with a separate heat pump water heater than having that complicated.
You'd still have to have 1 unit outside if you went with geothermal.
No, with geothermal, so the heat pump water heaters are completely self-contained. They pull heat from the indoor air. So it's, so they are going to, the heat that they pull is going to create a little bit extra load on the heating system, but it turns out it's still a win. But those heat pump water heaters, if you go over to Home Depot, they're on the racks now, so to speak, and they're completely self-contained. They install, apart from needing electric supply that you might not have if you have gas now. It's like installing a regular water heater. Other questions? Yes?
Approximately how long does a heat pump last?
So the question is, how long does a heat pump last? Well, they're similar to air conditioning. Central air conditioners, typically 15 to 20 years at the outside. So I think you could expect 15 to 20 years out of a heat pump reasonably, but they may, I've certainly seen functioning air conditioners that are older than that. Other questions?
Sure.
Yes?
To start the process, is there a list of vendors that will come and do the quote for you?
So if you go to the, in order to qualify for the Mass Save rebates now, you have to choose an installer that's in the Mass Save heat pump installer network. So if you go to masssave.com and look for that list, and they have some filtering criteria. Unfortunately, if you use that, you're still going to get a list of hundreds of installers, which is not that helpful. So the best thing to do is talk to neighbors, talk to friends, talk to folks on the sustainability committee, may be able to mention some names. As a heat pump coach, I have a short list of 8 installers or so that I give to Wayland residents, but it's not appropriate for me to mention that list here. Yeah, you have to get references. Don't always believe their social networks like Nextdoor.com, and sometimes the advice you get there is not all that trustworthy. With any installer, even the good installers, there are going to be some people who complain about them. Some people will, it may be a good installer who complains that they're too expensive. Well, to provide sometime, it's not always the case, but some installers that provide consistently good service do charge more for their services. But that's the power of getting multiple quotes will make sure that you have a fair price for your system. All right, let me get this gentleman. He hasn't.
What are any potential downsides to heat pumps or problems?
So the question is, what downsides are there to heat pumps? I think it was, I can't remember if it was Larry or Don, with these ductless systems, if you had a baseboard system where the baseboard loop runs all around the exterior of the house, they're usually pretty comfortable. You get nice, even heat. Now you're putting in a ducted a wall unit here and a wall unit there, and so you may not have as even distribution as you did with that baseboard system. So I would say with the ductless systems, the trickiest thing, and that's where the installer's experience matters, is making sure that they're in locations where the warm air is going to get distributed well around the room.
And it's air conditioning, it's less of a problem. What we use, our system.
Don, you'll have to come up to the mic because the online folks can't hear.
It's less of a problem for air conditioning, because once you get the air dried out, it's not that important where it's coming from. You dry the air out, lower the humidity, and it's very comfortable. So all of these systems have a dry setting, which runs at a very low fan speed, and you can just run it all the time. Our Fujitsu system down on the ground floor cools the entire ground floor. Does the kitchen get hot when we're baking something? Sure, there's temperature differential around the house, but the house is dry. So air conditioning is less of a problem than heating in those situations.
Yes, this.
Just an estimate, how much does it cost for a 3-bedroom house to, you know, on what, they send out the bills monthly?
You're talking about the electricity cost, or so the question is how much would it cost for the example is a 3-bedroom house, and are you asking about the electricity cost or the installation cost?
Well, I think I have the idea installation's about 15,000.
Okay, yeah, that's probably not too far off, yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
once you have it all in,
Uh-huh.
what can someone plan on
For the, yeah, so I don't,
for a 2-bedroom?
Uh-huh.
I'll do that too.
I'm going to go back to this cost comparison slide that I had. Okay, so this cost comparison, so the question is about the ongoing energy cost if you have a heat pump, 3-bedroom home, let's say it's, do you have an example of how many square feet? 1,500 square feet, maybe, or two?
Whatever an average.
Okay, all right, let's say 1,500 square feet. So this comparison is for a 2,000 square foot home, and it's the annual, the heating season cost for the heat pump, so it's about $2,200. So it would be, for a 1,500 square foot home, it'd be about 75% of that. So it would be about $1,600, let's say, and on a monthly basis during the heating season now. So the heating season is about 5 months long. So you're looking at something like maybe $300 a month during the winter months.
Per month? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, according to this chart, if you're heating with natural gas, you'll never pay for the air source heat pump.
Yeah, so the question is, the observation is that if you're heating with natural gas, you'll never pay for the air source heat pump. So I think folks have a heat pump, the payback, even with the savings for a ground source heat pump, is very long. But keep in mind, so if you're comparing this with rooftop solar, it's not quite the case anymore, but rooftop solar, you didn't need rooftop solar. The only argument, if you looked at it financially, was would the rooftop solar be cheaper over time? Would it pay back? Because there's an installation cost with the rooftop solar. And the incentives were so generous for rooftop solar that there was a payback period. Heating is not optional. You don't, when you think about your food, it's a necessity in this climate. So when you think about food, is there a payback cost on food? No. Is there a payback? So it's really about the relative cost. You need a heating system, and so it doesn't generally make sense to consider changing your heating system until it needs to be replaced. But at the point it needs to be replaced, then you have options. And as I said earlier to one of the other questioners, if it's there are the hybrid solutions where you have the gas and the heat pump. If you use the heat pump when it's above 30 degrees and the gas below 30 degrees, you'll end up in about the same place for cost. If you care a lot about your greenhouse gas emissions, you might be willing to pay the extra $300-400 a year to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. You're going to be reducing reducing your home's greenhouse gas emissions by 3 tons. So a ton of emissions is, depending on who you ask, is worth anywhere from $100 to $300.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
There is, I've never heard of a house blowing up because of their electric heat source or their solar. There's a chocolate factory that just killed 7 people in Pennsylvania. That was a gas explosion. But above and beyond that, there is no level that the fossil fuel companies are required to meet. So if you're looking long-term at whether electricity is better than gas in your home, putting the safety issue aside, we saw a huge spike in prices that fell completely, but the way our systems are set up, you get charged for 6 months, whether you like it or not. So when they did the huge spike, everybody in this room is paying super profits if you're buying gas. That's methane. They call it natural gas, but it's actually called methane. So in your consideration of what you should do for your own family in your home, if you have if you have gas stoves, if you have a gas heating system, please replace them for not only yourselves and your own health, but for the health of the planet. I am an environmentalist, and I will frequently admit that. But a lot of times we talk about cost is what's happening right now, but there is an ongoing cost to the use of natural gas in your home and in your community.
Can I amplify that for you?
Yes.
Probably you can have a good idea, how long does it take when you finally chose the company that was gonna install it? How long did it take about?
For them to actually put it in?
Yeah.
It was 3 weeks wait till they got the equipment, and then they only took about 4 days to finish it. And that's with 2 separate heads.
To what?
There's 2 different mini splits in my house.
I want to expand or support.
You need to get behind the mic.
Thank you. What Larry said about natural gas. And I taught at Boston Architectural, and a student was doing a study of his house about how to make it more energy efficient. And he found out that obviously it's heated with natural gas. There's no payback to make it more insulated if you're looking at natural gas. He said, I don't have a master's thesis. I said, well, why don't you look at why that's so? Natural gas is artificially cheap because it does not factor in the environmental cost of extracting it from the ground, which is enormous. And natural gas, compared to other energy sources, I think is artificially low. So people say, well, I have natural gas. If you have natural gas, that's the cheapest way to heat, but it's not the best thing for the planet. And as Larry said, which a lot of people say, do you like natural gas? I said, no, because natural gas fails catastrophically. Oil heat doesn't, electric heat doesn't. It's a danger. And I know I'm an alarmist, but I won't have it in my house. But more importantly, it's artificially low because it does not factor in the environmental costs of extracting it in Pennsylvania and New York and where they frack it. And we haven't even dealt with that. The object of going to heat pumps is to become, is to support clean energy and lower greenhouse emissions.
I want to add one more thing. When you buy natural gas, you're sending your money to Texas, to Pennsylvania. If you use renewables based in New England, we can keep that money here and use it for our own economic development. We have been subsidizing Texas and Oklahoma for years. And I really want to keep the dollars here. We had a great library. We could build a bigger one.
Okay. With that, I'm going to wrap our program up. Really appreciate everyone coming out today. Huge thank you to our speaker, Steve. Super knowledgeable. Thank you. Going back to that last slide. If we can, there we go. And if you want to get started with heat pumps, you can get started with your Mass Save audit, unless you've had it in the last 2 years. Go to this website, and they'll get you started with the assessment, and then with your heat pumps. The other thing I will mention is that this is the 4th in a series of 4. We will be posting all of these videos on the city sustainability website. So if you want to go back and watch anything, if you wanted to see another issue, you can go do that at your leisure. That should be coming up in a month? About a month. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, everyone.
So thank you all for coming. Please remember the evaluation forms in the back and include any thoughts you may have on future programs that you're interested in seeing here at the library. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
I won't have it, and we're gonna be.
Yes.